Recorded Books presents an unabridged recording of Jar City by Arnaldur Indridason, translated from the Icelandic by Bernard Scudder, narrated by George Guidall, and directed by Angel Morality Dodson. This book opens with the following short note on Icelandic names. Icelanders always address each other using first names, since most people have a patronymic rather than a proper surname, ending in son for a son and totir for a daughter. People are listed by first names even in the telephone directory. Strange as it may sound to the English ear, first names are therefore used throughout the police hierarchy and when police and criminals address one another. Erlendur's full name is Erlendur Sveinsson, and his daughter is Eva Lind Erlendsdóttir. Matronymics are rare, although Orithur is specifically said to be Kolbrunardóttir, Kolbrun's daughter. Some families do have traditional surnames, however, either derived directly from or else modeled on Danish, as a result of the colonial rule which lasted until early in the 20th century. Priam is one of those traditional surnames, and as such it does not reveal the gender of the bearer. In the case of Marion Priam, the ambiguous first name compounds this secondary mystery. And now, Jar City.
Chapter 1. The words were written in pencil on a piece of paper placed on top of the body. 3 words incomprehensible to Erlendur. It was the body of a man of about 70. He was lying on the floor on his right side, against the sofa in a small sitting room, wearing a blue shirt and fawn corduroy trousers. He wore slippers on his feet. His hair was starting to thin, almost completely gray. It was stained with blood from a large wound on his head. On the floor not far from the body was a big glass ashtray with sharp corners. It too was covered in blood. The coffee table had been overturned. This was a basement flat in a 2-story house in Norðurmýri. It stood in a small garden enclosed on 3 sides by a stone wall. The trees had shed their leaves, which carpeted the garden and covered the ground, and the knotty branches stretched up towards the darkness of the sky. Along a gravel drive which led to the garage, Reykjavik CID were arriving at the scene. The district medical officer was expected. He would sign the death certificate. The body had been reported found about 15 minutes earlier. Erlendur, detective inspector with the Reykjavik police, was one of the first on the scene. He expected his colleague, Sigurður Óli, any minute. The October dusk spread over the city and the rain slapped around in the autumn wind. Someone had switched on a lamp which stood on a table in the sitting room and cast a gloomy light on the surroundings. In other respects, nothing on the scene had been touched. The forensics team were setting up powerful fluorescent lights on a tripod to illuminate the flat. Erlendur noticed a bookcase and a worn suite of furniture, the overturned coffee table, an old desk in one corner, a carpet on the floor, blood on the carpet. The sitting room opened into the kitchen, and another door led from it to the den and onto a small corridor where there were 2 rooms and a toilet. The police had been notified by the upstairs neighbor. He had come home that afternoon, after collecting his 2 boys from school, and it struck him as strange to see the basement door wide open. He could see inside his neighbor's flat, and called out to discover whether he was in. There was no answer. He peered inside the flat, and called his name again, but there was no response. They'd been living on the upper floor for several years, but did not know the old man in the basement well. The elder son, 9 years old, was not as cautious as his father, and quick as a flash he was in the neighbor's sitting room. A moment later the child came back and said there was a dead man in the flat, and he really didn't seem too perturbed by it. "You watch too many movies," the boy's father said, and cautiously made his way into the flat where he saw his neighbor lying dead on the sitting room floor. Erlendur knew the dead man's name. It was on the doorbell, but to avoid the risk of making an idiot of himself, he put on some thin rubber gloves and fished the man's wallet out of a jacket hanging on a peg by the front doorway, and found a payment card with a photograph on it. The man's name was Holperk, 69 years old, dead in his home. Presumed